Hello, this is Dr. RoboCoach with a review of the CBS Sports line, artificial intelligence in their draft room, for lack of a better word. It's not really artificial intelligence, it's more like a cheat sheet. But nevertheless, it is a live cheat sheet. It's interactive, so players disappear. And um, overall, if you don't want to listen to this whole thing, I'd say it's pretty good. And you can like and subscribe below, and then you can just stop and ignore the rest of this. Um, I'd say this is probably the standard to beat because if you're not as good as what you get for free in the draft room, that is, if you being a vendor of draft assistants, and like Fantasy Pros has their draft assistant. If your draft assistant is not better than what you get for free in the draft room, then nobody should buy it, obviously. And so let's take a look in a little more depth what you get from Sportsline for free. So you can see this draft has begun, and this is pretty much your cheat sheet, and they're arranged according to this value here, and it's going off the field, off the screen, but it says the default rankings are based on your projections, blah, 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 and it incorporates value-based drafting. And that's, if you remember, one of the things that I've uh, said that you've got to have. You've got to have value-based drafting. The numbers have to be adjusted for the value at each different position. You can Google that and get more information. So what you see here, if I click on that, it will sort by fantasy points, and these are fantasy points based upon my league and my scoring system. So that's the other thing you got to have is customization. So you can see that according to fantasy points, Patrick Mahomes is the number one player. Um, but since CBS Sports Line uses value-based drafting, and there's only one quarterback needed per team, they're not going to be worth as much. There are two running backs and two wide receivers needed per team, so those are going to go up. More demand, more supply, but still the demand outstrips the supply. So VBD takes that into account, and so you can see Mahomes, despite having the highest fantasy points, has only a rank of 5. So when you draft, you can just draft according to that default ranking, which incorporates VBD. And I double checked their numbers, and I found them to be correct. I mean, I couldn't get an exact match, but in general, my numbers matched their numbers. So running backs were worth slightly more than wide receivers, and that's what I'm seeing. So yeah, Julio Jones was their number one ranked running back, and he's got a 354 fantasy point projection, but 354 still ranks behind 291 in Ezekiel Elliott. And that's because wide receivers got downgraded due to VBD, and it's that it's actually correct. I think they downgraded him, a little too much. According to my calculations, he should be slightly above Ezekiel Elliott, but still, I'm not gonna nitpick him. I think maybe I overlooked something um, in Julio's numbers. In any event, so there's uh, there's Julio, and he's correctly ranked. So this is great. You can see the cross through the players as they go off, and then you just go down the list and pretty much can just take whoever is next up. And I have uh, VBD built into my rankings, and I can just go through the rankings, cross them off like I would a printed cheat sheet, and that's great. Um, there there are some deficiencies, but um, they got the two key ones, which is VBD and customizability. Um, what's lacking here is hot or cold. So, and well, the first of many things that are lacking are hot and cold. So you don't know whether these players are front loaded or whether they're back loaded. You don't know whether they're gonna basically you don't know whether they're gonna come out and fall flat on their face in the first 3 or 4 games, and then they become impossible to trade, and you've just lost 3 games, and your season is tanked because you know if your guy is Ezekiel or any of these guys in the top 5 or so running backs, and they come out and they fall flat, well, the guy that you picked up in the second round isn't going to make up for Saquon Barkley coming out and having a bad 3 games. It's just not going to happen. He's got to be your stud. So you need to know whether he's going to be hot. Um, maybe not Saquon because he's sort of in a tier all by himself, but these guys like Kamara and like McCaffrey, these two guys, yeah, it might be the deciding factor. And that leads me to the other thing that's missing, which is tier. These fantasy points aren't, they don't have the accuracy to predict that Saquon's going to have 356 fantasy points this year, plus or minus 2. No, they don't have that sort of accuracy. This is a very rough estimation, and these numbers need to be clustered in the mathematical term. And so it's not being done here, and so it's a misleading presentation. Basically, they're saying Kamara is better than McCaffrey, and that's probably not the case. There's probably Saquon in his own tier, and then there's these 3 guys in their next tier, the second tier. So that's a big problem because if these guys are all in the same tier, that means they're the same player, and you can wait to get the last one of them. So it doesn't really matter for these 3, but it does matter later in the draft because, these players are going 1, 2, 3, second pick, third pick, fourth pick. And so you can't wait later in the draft to get one. But for players who are in the same tier with a second rounder, then you can wait to the second round to get players who are going to be just as good as first rounders. That's the way tiers work. So bottom line is you want tier, it's not here. Okay, so you're also not getting WUP, which is wait until pick. I've discussed this. Nobody provides WUP really, but you want to know the what pick in the draft you can pick up a player at. So, Patrick Mahomes is, you might be, his ranking is 5. So, yeah, according to VBD, he should be going until 5, but his ADP is 8. So, can you wait till 8? Somebody needs to do the math, and it gets even harder. Um, in this case, it's a first round pick, and so if you've got the 6th pick or the 7th pick, you're just going to have to expend it on Mahomes because you know that you're not going to get him on the wrap. But there are going to be times when it looks like a player you won't be able to get him on the wrap, and you'll need the wait until pick. That'll allow you to quickly figure out whether or not you'll get a player on the wrap. So they don't have that here. The wrap in snake drafts, if you don't know, is when it turns around and you draft from the last pick to the first pick, and then it wraps again, and it just keeps going back and forth like that. So without wait until pick WUP, you don't know whether you're gonna get a player before the wrap. It's basically the percent likelihood that he's gonna be there on your next pick. Some sites present likelihood, like in Fantasy Pros, they gave you a likelihood that he'll be available in your next pick, that's almost there. That's almost whoop. Um, that's almost telling you to wait until your third round pick to pick up player X. That would be a whoop. Instead, they're giving you a percentage that of whoop, which may actually, you know, be okay. It's not exactly, you know, what whoop could be, but some other nice things that you're getting here is injury information, right here presented to you, so you don't have to click through. You know that Ezekiel has got an injury. I don't know that he really does have an injury. Um, yeah, it's an alert. Okay, apologize. I thought that meant injury, but they're just saying that's an alert. Um, and it's a correct to have the alert here on the front page where you can see it. You don't want to have to click through these little note things to find out more about the player because you're on the clock. You've got to make a pick. And so this is really nice that you get this here. Um, and these are where I did the calculations. The calculations were actually correct, so I double checked. Daryl Henderson was the 30, was the baseline player in my baseline running back. So um, all running backs were correctly calculated, and I did. You can see that I did a little math here and figured out that wide receivers should be devalued. So I did double check these numbers, and the numbers appear to be correct. So you can rely on this default ranking. So I wish CBS would make a bigger deal out of that because it would be a mistake if somebody comes in here and it's like, whoa, why are they ranked? They don't know VBD. They can make the mistake of just clicking the fantasy points column and draft them in order of fantasy points because somebody, who doesn't know what VBD is might think, well, I want the most fantasy points. And that would lead them to using their first pick in the draft to get Patrick Mahomes. If they had the first pick, they should definitely take Saquon Barkley, and you only see that if you have them correctly ranked. So, this basically is not dummy proof. They could dummy proof it better. But uh, Yeah, it's hard to fault them for that. So, um, if dummies want to play, then dummies maybe they should lose their money. Although I like new guys and to win some money. And just because it's fun and if their first experience is bad. Anyway, I digress. So, this is a great tool for the draft. It's lacking just a couple of things. Tiers, it's lacking hot and cold. Um, but I mean, don't get me wrong, tiers is huge. Without tiers, the person using this can make a big mistake, a huge mistake. And you don't really see the drop-offs as much as you would with tiers. I mean, like, look, there's a huge drop-off here um, from Ezekiel Elliott down to Le'Veon Bell. It goes from 290 all the way down to 260. So that's a huge drop, but it's only a couple of ranking points away. And so if you don't look closely, then you might think, oh, well, these players are in the same tier. No, no, they're not. Not even close. Not even close. Um, well, I mean, maybe Ezekiel is, but McCaffrey, just one, two, three, four picks ahead is in a gigantic tier increase there. It makes a big difference. And likewise, all the other rankings don't cut it. A 1 point difference in ranking might be the difference between a 50-point tier drop. So you have to do everything you can. If you're basically, you know, here's your first big teardrop, and then there's your second big teardrop. It goes drops 30, and then it drops another 30. So if you're down here, with Le'Veon Bell, um, then now you're in like this tier that you're is just a big clump of people down in the mid 200s. And whether you get the first guy in the mid 200s or the last guy in the mid 200s, it just doesn't matter because they're all in the same tier. And so you can draft it with the very last pick and still get a guy from that tier. So it has a huge impact on your draft strategy. You can trade away your fifth pick for in my league, I can trade away my fifth pick for the 18th pick. I have 18 teams and still get a player in the same tier as the fifth pick. And then I get the 19th pick on the wrap, and I'm able to pick a top tier wide receiver. Huge strategy difference right there. Um, and it's just not covered here. They should cover it, and it's critical. It makes all the difference. And of course, hot and cold makes all the difference too. All things being equal, all these guys in the same tier, nine of them are going to be hot. One of them is going to be cold. You have to avoid that cold guy. And if you accidentally draft the guy who's going to be cold in the first three games, because that's the hard part of his schedule, it's, goodbye season. Oh well, if that happens on your first pick, you draft a guy who's going to be cold with your first round pick, then first round picks make huge amount of difference. You can't overcome a problem like that, and they're not telling you here. So yeah, hot and cold is missing, tier is missing, and they're important, and they need to be there, but they're not. What would also be nice. So those are the three things you're missing. But overall, in terms of draft assistant tools, in relation to Fantasy Pros draft assistant tool, um, this is better. This is better than Fantasy Pros, and I get it for free. Fantasy Pros had VBD, but it didn't have tiers. You can watch the Fantasy Pros review, but you can see that I gave it um, a C or a B, but this is definitely a B. Um, and it's a smidge better than what Fantasy Pros is good. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't bad, but this is better, and it's free. So got to give it points for being free, and it's really easy to use because it's right part of your, if you're using Sportsline, it's right part of your draft. This has been Dr. RoboCoach. Good luck in your season 2019. And please like and subscribe below. And if you listen this long, then send me an email, robocoach@fantasyfootballdraft.com, and I will get you a free subscription. Tell me that you watched this review of CBS Sportsline live draft room interactive cheat sheet and you liked it. Thank you very much.